Hello. So, you've found the job you want to apply for because you know exactly where to look for it. And now we'll get into the application form and, of course, the dreaded interview. I'll see you there. Hi, my name's Chris. I've had a very successful 20-year career in teaching English overseas. In fact, I'm still doing it, moving to China next week. If you'd like to know how to do this yourself, please subscribe to the channel and I'll tell you how to go about it. Okay, welcome. We're going to begin by looking at the application process. Now, whether that's going to be a CV or resume or an application form, I think the content of the two are pretty similar, so we're going to cover them all as one. A lot of places are going to ask for both. I've never understood why, but let's get into it. Just like any other kind of job, employers are going to be interested in two main things. They want to know about your qualifications and they want to know about your experience. When applying for English teaching jobs overseas, they're also going to be interested in your nationality. And they'll do this to ascertain as to whether or not you're a native English speaker. We've discussed this before. It's very unfair. It leaves a lot of great teachers out in the cold. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. So, first up, let's look at qualifications. I'm not going to go through exactly how we write a CV. I'm not going to go through exactly how we fill in an application form. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube and all over the internet about how to do that. And they do it better than I can. I'm just going to tell you the bits that are specifically relevant to finding English teaching work overseas. So, as normal, with your qualifications, you're going to list them in reverse chronological order, so the ones you got most recently at the top, and that coming down back to probably school, where you did your GCSEs or A-levels or whatever you did in the country where you did your first set of exams at school. With regard to English teaching, if you do have any specific qualifications, such as a CELTA or a Delta or a degree that's relevant, that's among other degrees that you have, I don't know, do make sure in some way that that is highlighted. Maybe put it at the top if they're not absolutely strict about the reverse chronological order. Or if they are, and it's an application form, and a lot of them are, make sure it's emboldened in some way. Make sure it stands out so that your prospective employer doesn't just look at those first few qualifications and miss the one that's really important to them. What it's worth doing in this section, if you have limited experience, if you've got little or no actual teaching experience, and that'll be true for a lot of people because we've all got to start somewhere, draw out anything in your qualifications that you feel might be relevant to your prospective teaching work. So my degree was in theatre. It had an educational element to it, but it wasn't a degree in specifically teaching English overseas. So what I did with mine when I was first starting out was draw on elements that crossed over. So obviously for a degree in theatre, I spent a lot of time on stage. I spent a lot of time talking in front of people. I've controlled audiences. I've persuaded people to enjoy a show. My degree has a very language-based element to it. And clearly, in order to hold the audience's attention, you need relatively good communication skills. And all of those things really do count towards successful teaching. In doing that, you're not just showing an employer that you have those skills. You're also letting an employer know that despite the fact that you don't have much experience, you are aware of the skills that are required, without you actually having to say, "Excuse me, sir, I am aware of the skills that are required." Saying that you have those skills, saying that you've developed those skills, or have done something to help you to develop those skills, will make that clear to an employer without you being quite so explicit about it. Looking at the work experience part of any application form or CV, resume, I think the most important thing to remember is that employers aren't as interested in hearing about what you've done as hearing about what you've achieved. So if at some point you have had a little bit of teaching experience doing a summer job or even voluntary work at a school, and you say, I taught a group of 20 children, they were 10 years old, it doesn't really say much about what it is that you've done. If you approach it as I worked with a group of 10-year-old children to improve their English skills in an inner city school in Nottingham, and over a period of 6 weeks, we saw a marked improvement in their test scores. Test scores rose on average by 15%. Then, like with the qualifications we talked about before, you're showing employers that you are aware of what they're looking for, you're aware of what you're trying to achieve, and you're offering some evidence at least that you have been in a position where you have achieved that. That's really important. So what you've achieved rather than just a list of things that you've done. When you're talking about things that you've done, always draw on times when you have been adaptable or flexible. If someone's employing you in another country, they want to see at least some suggestion that you're not going to get there and freak out when things aren't quite as you expected them to be. Because let's face it, things are unlikely to be quite as you expect them to be. This, after all, is the point of going. And again, much as we were with the qualifications, if you've got a long history of employment in fields that weren't education-based, draw out the things that will relate to the skills required in the classroom. So your interpersonal skills, your communication, your ability to speak in front of an audience, your ability to assess situations, your ability to think on your feet. If, let's say, you were selling secondhand cars, you've communicated with people, you've persuaded them, you've changed their mind about things, you've been the kind of personal guy or personable guy that someone is prepared to buy a car from. If we relate that back to talking about what we've achieved as well, and you happen to be the highest seller of cars in February of last year in your business, we can put those two things together and see, again, some evidence that what you say about your skills and what you say about your abilities tie together and offer an overall picture of you as somebody that an employer might want in their classroom. Another massive part of any form is going to be information about you, and that's often divided up into a couple of bits. On a CV particularly, I would include hobbies and interests, and in those hobbies and interests, be honest. Do say what hobbies and interests you have, but do try to include something about travel. Even if you have never been outside of your home country, you can say how much you've enjoyed going to new places within your own country, how much you've enjoyed meeting new people and building relationships and building friendships, and just enjoying new experiences. That's really important. What I'd say to leave off with hobbies and interests is socializing. Here on the expatriate circuit, there are a lot of people who really enjoy socializing a little bit too much. We have a lot of alcoholics do the tour, and they will usually describe what they do as just being sociable. So in this environment, saying that you love socializing as a hobby or an interest can give the wrong impression. I would, if I were you, but I'm not, leave it off. The other part of the About You section is usually some sort of character description. It's really important that you put yourself across as being confident and outgoing and sociable. That's not the same as listing socializing as a hobby. Saying that you're sociable will mean getting along well with people. which is essential in a classroom. I think particularly if you're looking for one of those language school jobs where you are going to be working with adults, an ability to build quick adult relationships there is going to be a godsend to any employer. This is also a great place to mention any personal achievements that you've made, whether they're sporting achievements or academic achievements, anything that's not really going to fit into the rest of the application form or resume. Here's the place to get it in. If you're looking for a first-time job working with kids, maybe you could mention a time when you've taken care of younger siblings, or a time when you've nursed the children of family friends through a difficult time. Anything that you can draw on to make you look more suitable as a teacher, this is the place that you can do it. Obviously, what you put in any of this form really does need to be true. It's okay to write down the truth and colour it in a little bit, but don't make things up, because the chances are that you will be caught. Not least because if you enter a job overseas, you're going to be stressed enough anyway when you get there, and you don't want to find that because they believe you've got all this experience, you're going to be dropped in at the deep end and find yourself floundering. I've never done this myself, but I do know people who have, and they've had a really horrible time. The final thing that any application form for a teaching role is liable to ask you for, and what you would put with the accompanying letter in your application if you're sending a resume, is your personal statement. Now, nobody likes writing these things. They're horrible. It's a time when you write about your beliefs in education, your motivations in education, how you think education should go, how you feel students should be motivated, what curriculum, what approach, what everything you think is best. It's horrible to write because most employers looking at this aren't particularly interested in what you think. They want to know that you think something similar to them, or you think something that will be marketable to parents. So this is where AI is your friend. We're not going to make things up, we're not going to lie about them, but if we can go to AI, put in the job description, the URL of the school, and let AI have a little look at what the school's looking for, then put in your resume as written so far, and ask it to write you a personal statement for a teaching job of X number of words. So we come to the interview. The application has gone well, they want to speak to you, and that in itself is an achievement. So just getting to the interview stage, particularly if this is early in your career, is an achievement. And if this is as far as it goes, do be pleased that this has happened and you've got this far. So this is going to be a video chat. Now that could be on Teams or Google, or it could be on Zoom or any of the platforms. So one of the first things you need to do before this all begins to happen, download those apps to your laptop or to your phone and familiarize yourself with them. You're not going to be asked to make PowerPoint presentation. It's unlikely. So you don't need to know every little feature of it, but you do need to know how to adjust your microphone, how to set the volume, where the best place in the room you're liable to be is situated in terms of lighting and things. I know my lighting is not fantastic today, but, well, it's a long story. I'll share it with you in the next video. Just about every job I've ever had outside of teaching, and I've had a few, has been a 2-interview process. You'll have that first general getting to know you, are you ballpark what they're looking for. Then the second interview, where they'll really knuckle down to the role and start comparing you to the other applicants who have got to this stage. Increasingly looking for teaching roles, it's a 3-stage process, certainly for international teaching roles. So those two stages are there, but they are stages 2 and 3 of the process. In everything I've looked at over the last year or so, they've had a stage 1 process, which has been either with a prospective colleague or with the head of HR, in which you'll have a very, very general and informal chat. What they're looking for during this informal chat is whether or not you're an arsehole. And I know that doesn't sound great, but that really is what they're looking for. They're looking for whether or not you're somebody that the rest of the team is going to be able to get on with. Remember that when you take a job overseas, that job is going to be a much larger part of your life, particularly in the early stages, than it would be in any other employment situation. You're going to be in a new country where you probably don't speak the language. So making friends outside of work is going to be tricky to begin. I'm not saying it won't happen, it will, and they'll be great friends and friends for life. But initially, you're going to be reliant on your colleagues for a little bit of social time as well. So if you're not the sort of person that they feel they can get on with, you're not going to have a very nice time, and you're liable to spoil the time that the other people are having as well. Your job will inevitably then take up more of your life because it's something that you're going to base conversation around in your social time. And again, this doesn't go on forever. This isn't a terrible, terrible thing that's going to ruin the rest of your life. But in the early stages, it is going to be a thing, and knowing that you're going to get on and not behave like an arse when you get there is really important in order to get you and everyone else settled in. So with that in mind, I think the most important advice I could give you here is to be yourself. Don't pretend to be somebody you're not, because if you get hired for being somebody that you're not, you're going to have a hellish time when you get there. If we've got a school that's full of quiet and reserved people, and you're loud and flamboyant and full of energy, if you've pretended that you're quiet and reserved for the interview because that's the feeling that you get about the place, when you get there and everybody else really is quiet and reserved and you're champing at the bit to go out and party, you're going to have a horrible time. And obviously that's the same in reverse. Don't put on a flamboyant and outgoing character to appear to be the life and soul of the party to a school if you're really quiet and reserved, because you will get booked to work with people who are loud and flamboyant all the time, and you sitting at home thinking, I wish everybody had just shut up and leave me alone, isn't going to be a very nice start for you. So show the best side of yourself, but don't invent a new character for yourself. It really isn't worth it. The final thing I would say it's worth having prepared to go into an interview is an all-purpose story. This is a story that you've rehearsed many times about something you've done and perhaps embellished a little bit, but a story which can be drawn on to illustrate various things about yourself. It can be drawn on to talk about your flexibility. It can be drawn on to talk about your communication skills. We've drawn on to talk about how well you get along with people, or how well you motivate people, or how well you lead people. Mine is generally about some workshops I used to run in Brunei for a large number of local teachers who, frankly needed the help. And it always went wrong. There was always something, rooms double booked, people not showing up, people being disgruntled that anybody was questioning their teaching prowess, people just wanting to be at home rather than being at a meeting in the afternoon. There were tasks set in this meeting, they wouldn't be done. People would need motivating to do them. People would need pushing to do them. And this led to a load of stories where I successfully overcame those issues and moved this project on to be a very successful thing that ran for years. They're all true stories. Sometimes I might alter the order in which things happened. But when I'm telling that story, it's a story I've told many times before, and it makes my answer to questions seem very much more natural and very much easier for me. It helps. Okay, it's the questions. Obviously, when you go to an interview, the main thing that's on your mind before you start is, what are they going to ask me? What questions are they going to ask? Well, in a teaching interview, here are some things that they will ask you. If you take these on board, consider them for your all-purpose story that we've just talked about, you will have some decent answers ready. So absolutely guaranteed, they're going to ask you how you would motivate a class. Or they're going to ask you to give you an example of how you've motivated people in the past, which is when that all-purpose story is absolute gold. In terms of how you'd motivate a class, there are many ways we can go about it. Some great answers are, I like to appeal to their interests. We're teaching a language here rather than a subject. So even though the language element of this course might be difficult for them, if I can allow them to write and speak and present about things that they know, they're going to feel a little bit more motivated. The lovely answer to this question is, I like to put students into mixed ability groups. I like to set fun activities for them to do in those groups, so that part of that activity is a social interaction between them and not just a dialogue between me and individuals in the class. I find that enjoying what they're doing really helps students to move forward, and they find it really motivating. Fantastic answer. They are going to ask you about your flexibility. Again, that is probably going to relate to your all-purpose story if you have one ready. Can you give me an example of a time when you have been flexible? I say, when I answer this question, I relate back to my all-purpose story about the workshops I used to run in Brunei. And I've got various examples of where things have gone wrong and I have adapted them. The particular story about double booking that I tell quite a lot, in which I moved my class to a completely different part of the building, and we had to alter what we did while a class of, well, they were head teachers, so they were much more important than we were, got to use our room. So in the short term, I gave this solution, or presented this solution, and then for future events, because these things ran for weeks at a time, I made sure that that double booking was not an issue anymore. But by reverting back to my all-purpose story, I'm always able to answer those questions quickly, easily, and naturally. The last thing I want to mention that they're almost guaranteed to ask you about is professional development. And when teachers talk about professional development, they talk about in-service training, or learning from mistakes and experience, or learning from colleagues, or anything that's going to improve your classroom practice while you're on the job. It's great to say that you very much like the notion of improving your practice day by day. It's great to say that you would love to attend any in-service training that was available. It's lovely to say that you would be happy to run and attend workshops run by colleagues. And the golden answer here is that you evaluate every lesson after you've taught it, whether this is actually true or not. That you would like to evaluate every lesson after you've taught it to see what went well and what could have been done better. That's an absolute basic of teaching. And you're going to do that anyway, even if you're not aware that you're doing it. If something's gone horribly wrong in a lesson, it's going to dwell on your mind, and you're going to think, I don't want to do that again. And you probably won't. If something's gone well in a lesson, you're going to repeat it, not least because you know it works and it's easier than thinking of something else. So those are great answers to that question about professional development. At the end of every interview, you're going to get the bit where they go, have you got any questions? My advice here is to have some questions. Whether you care about the answer or not, having questions shows the interviewer that you've paid attention during the interview. It shows them that you're interested in the role and you're interested in how you could perform well in the role. You've shown an interest in them and their establishment, and they like that. So, good questions to ask. Ask about the students. The students are the most important part of any trading place, any school, whatever. The students are what brings the money in, and the students are what brings the accolades in as well. So asking about the students is a fantastic way to show a positive and worthwhile interest in the establishment that you're going to. You can ask about student numbers. Obviously, that's going to affect your working day quite heavily. You can ask about student backgrounds, socioeconomic background, their cultural background, even about their ethnic background. It's something that might feel very uncomfortable in any other kind of job application, but employers will know that you're leading to a point of asking whether or not all the children or students in that class speak the same language. Because if they don't, you have got it made. It's fantastic. If they don't all speak the same language, the language that you're teaching them will become, when they're together, their base language for communication, and they will progress very much more quickly. So knowing this as you go in, even though the question itself can almost feel a little bit racist, when it's meant well, it really isn't going to be taken that way by an employer who understands exactly why it's being asked. Ask about the school as a whole. Do they have a particular reward system in place? Then that could be more likely in an actual school with children, but could happen as well in a language school, where different teams be pitted against each other for exam results or for test results or for attendance, and little rewards will be given along the way. Just a little bit of fun that students find very motivating. A lot of schools now like to have a Harry Potter style house system where house points are going to be gained for various achievements and behaviors and things, accomplishments along the way. Asking about that shows real interest in the establishment and in their method for motivating the children or adult students. I keep forgetting, I do apologize. I work with kids. And it shows that you're interested in finding ways and joining in with ways to keep those students motivated. How long has the school been running is another fantastic question. From a career point of view for you, if you can get in the ground floor of somewhere that's newer, you have a very much higher chance of moving up and being promoted to higher positions. Now, most of these jobs are not long-term jobs, but if over the 2 years you're with a school, you're promoted from base level to management level, your next set of applications are going to be going in at that management level, and you're going to be looking at what I found to be more satisfying work and definitely what I found to be more agreeable money. Ask about the curriculum. What curriculum do they follow? Do they follow a series of textbooks? Are activities going to be made up by the teacher? Are resources provided? What kind of materials are available? Again, very important to teaching. It's a really worthwhile question to ask. Final thing, in terms of student numbers again, you can ask whether the school's full to capacity or whether it's expanding. An expanding school and a school at full capacity are very different in the way that they operate. So it's a really worthwhile question that shows some interest and some base knowledge of how schools operate. Finally, on interviews, as I said at the beginning, particularly if you're early in your career, you've done well to get to the interview stage. So if you don't get through, don't be disheartened by it. Main thing to remember, I think, is that interviews, they're not only difficult to have as an interviewee, answering the questions, they're actually difficult to deliver if you're not very experienced in doing it for the person who is interviewing you. And this can lead to situations whereby someone who's inexperienced as an interviewer will make your life as an interviewee difficult. You just have to take that on the chin. I like to think that there are two kinds of interviewer. There's that interviewer that genuinely wants to know about you and wants to ask you questions and hear those answers and consider your merits on the answers that you give and how well you come across in that interview. The other, and it tends to be with the less experienced interviewers, is the can you guess what I'm thinking type of interview, where they have an answer in their mind before they've even asked the question, and all they want to do is see whether your answer matches the one that they've got in their head, because for some reason they think that answer is correct or more correct than anything else you could possibly say. In those situations, you might be lucky, you might hit every time, and they might offer you the job. But it's unlikely, and those are the worst kind of interviews that you can have to sit through. They will come up. Just don't be disheartened when they do. It's all valuable experience. That's it. That's how to apply for these jobs when you find them and how to get through the interview. Again, don't be disheartened by the interviews, or if you don't get the interviews, a lot of it is just a numbers game. But following these steps will help you to make the best of those numbers. So until next time, which will be a completely different video about my move to China, I'll see you then.